The case we are discussing today had a high chance of remaining unsolved. The police were practically powerless, but apart from the police, there was one more person who could not allow the criminal to go unpunished. The story begins in the suburbs of Kansas City, in the town of Leawood, a small and one of the safest cities in the state of Kansas. It's the kind of town where you know your neighbors by name. One of the residents of this town was a girl named Alexandra Illy, whom everyone called Ali Kemp. In 2002, she was a 19-year-old student at the University of Kansas. She had just finished her first year of studying to become an elementary school teacher. During her summer break in 2002, she decided to spend time in her hometown of Leawood with her parents, brother, friends, and boyfriend. For the summer, she got a job as a lifeguard at the outdoor public pool, Foxborough. By that time, her boyfriend and brother were already working there. On June 18 at 2 p.m., Ali came to work at the pool to replace her boyfriend, Phil. They planned to go on a date in the evening, so Ali was supposed to work until 5 p.m. After that, she was supposed to be replaced by her younger brother, Tyler. Everything went as planned. Alice's brother, Tyler, did come to the pool at 5 p.m. to replace her, but to his surprise, he could not find his sister at her workplace. Her books, notebooks, phone, and purse were on the table in the storage room, but Ali herself was nowhere to be found. This puzzled him because Ali would not leave work without being replaced. Around 5:15 p.m., Alice's brother called their father, Roger, and said he could not find his sister anywhere. Roger immediately dropped everything and went to the pool where Ali worked. Roger and Tyler carefully looked around again, but Ali was still nowhere to be found. The only place left unchecked was the pump room. Entering it, Roger saw a large piece of tarpaulin. A human leg was sticking out from under it. Lifting the tarpaulin, Roger saw the body of his daughter, Ali.
Leawood 911, what is your emergency?
I think my daughter's been murdered. She's not moving, and she's laying in the pool house. She's got blood all over. She's been
Okay.
down.
Stay on the phone. Do not hang up.
Oh, Allie, stay with us. Stay with us.
Alice's father, Roger, did everything he could to help her before the ambulance arrived, but unfortunately, she was declared dead almost immediately. The investigation into her murder began that same day. The room where the girl's body was found was in complete disarray. Items were scattered chaotically, leading police to believe there had been a struggle. It was likely that the girl had tried to defend herself. This was later confirmed by the fact that some of her fingers were broken, probably as a result of her attempt to fight back. The girl herself had been severely beaten. There was a large amount of blood on the floor, believed to have mostly come from a head wound. There were marks on her neck, presumably from a rope. Despite the severe beating, strangulation was the cause of her death. Unfortunately, the murder weapon was not found at the crime scene. Near the girl's body, an open, blood-stained tube of ointment was found. This ointment was usually kept in the first aid kit, but for some reason, it was found next to the body of the victim. This crime left many questions unanswered. One of them was, what was the motive? As mentioned earlier, the girl's purse, including her wallet, was found in the storage room, so robbery was ruled out. Another common motive for attacks on women is sexual assault. However, it was later determined that Ali had not been sexually assaulted. The absence of either of these two motives made the crime bizarrely strange. In any murder case, the first person to come under suspicion is usually the victim's partner. In this case, that was Alice's boyfriend, Phil. Ali had known Phil since school, and by 2002, they had been a couple for more than 5 years. It seemed that Phil had no reason to harm Ali. However, the police were obligated to consider him as a suspect. As mentioned earlier, Ali replaced Phil at work in the pool at 2 p.m. After that, he went to his second job, where he stayed until 4 p.m. Then he was at a friend's house, playing video games until he received a call that Ali was in the hospital. This was confirmed by the testimonies of people from Phil's second job, as well as by the friend he was playing with. So, Phil had an alibi. However, the police did receive one valuable piece of information from him. Ali had called him at 2:52 p.m., but he could not answer. When he called her back at 3:44 p.m., she didn't answer. This suggested that Ali had been killed during that time frame between 2:52 p.m. and 3:44 p.m. However, this did not bring the police any closer to finding the killer. Next, the hope was on the testimonies of possible witnesses. It seemed promising. A public pool on a summer day, surely there would be plenty of witnesses. But unfortunately, due to a stroke of bad luck, the weather that summer day was unsuitable for visiting the pool, so there were almost no people there. However, outside the pool, in the parking lot, there were people who could tell the police something interesting. Specifically, two people from a lawn care company were working in the parking lot that day. They remembered something that seemed suspicious to them. Around 2:40 p.m., when they were already at work, these two men were sitting in their car, having lunch. During their lunch, their attention was drawn to a vehicle that they were able to describe quite clearly. It was a beige 1980 Ford pickup truck. This vehicle seemed to be circling the parking lot, sometimes leaving and then returning. This was at least something. Although the police didn't have the vehicle's license plate number, they at least knew in which direction to move. Further valuable information was provided to the police by one of Alice's friends. As a reminder, Ali was presumably killed between 2:52 p.m. and 3:44 p.m. At 3:15 p.m., one of Alice's friends came to the pool to see her. Not seeing Ali outside, her friend loudly blew the lifeguard whistle, thinking it would be funny. At that moment, a man came out of the pump room, pretending to talk to someone. The friend thought it might be Alice's boss. To avoid causing trouble, the girl left the pool. The same man, by the way, even waved to Alice's friend, so she remembered him quite well. Now it was clear that this was most likely Alice's killer. Based on the description from Alice's friend, a very high-quality composite sketch of the suspected criminal was created. This undoubtedly increased the chances of catching the killer. The police had a description of the suspicious vehicle and a composite sketch of the suspected criminal. This information was shown on local TV. After that, the police received a huge number of messages from people who thought they had seen this man. But the person who attracted the most attention was a man who bore an incredible resemblance to the composite sketch. This was a man named James Drader. Detectives looked at his photo and the composite sketch and saw no differences. This was certainly a reason to at least meet with this man. But even more suspicion was added by the fact that James Drader owned an old Ford pickup truck. The truck was not beige, but it still could not be ignored. James Drader lived in the city of Alethi, about 20 minutes away from Leawood, where Ali was killed. Drader worked in a small auto repair shop. The police visited him at work. Drader denied any involvement in the attack and said that he had spent the entire day of Alice's murder at work. The police then questioned Drader's boss, who confirmed that Drader had indeed been at work on June 18. Thus, despite the striking resemblance to the composite sketch, Drader was excluded from the list of suspects. At this point, it seemed like everything had to start over. But then, the detectives received encouraging news from the police lab. Blood was found on a tube from the first aid kit at the crime scene and it did not belong to Ali, so the detectives obtained the killer's DNA. Parallel to the detective search, Alice's father, Roger, was conducting his own investigations. Almost every day, he came to the police station with different ideas about what could be done. His efforts eventually led to Alice's story being featured on the very popular show America's Most Wanted. There, the composite sketch of the suspected criminal was shown not only on local TV, but also nationally across the country. Again, the police received numerous messages from people who thought they knew the person in the composite sketch. But each of the suspects was eventually excluded from the list for various reasons. Thus, the case slowly hit another dead end. However, about 6 months after Alice's murder, the detectives received new information about a familiar face. In January 2003, in neighboring Kansas City, Colorado, news broke that a certain man was wanted for committing 3 rapes. Seeing his face on TV, Alice's father recognized him. He had seen him before. It was James Drader. Roger informed the police that the man they had previously excluded from the list of suspects was now wanted for a series of rapes. Even though it seemed that Drader had an alibi on the day of Alice's murder, there was no doubt that, with this new information, he needed to be checked again, his DNA taken, and compared with the DNA found at the crime scene. But there was one problem. By that time, Drader was on the run. Finding him was very difficult. It took a full 3 weeks to locate him. And as often happens in such cases, he was caught in a rather silly situation at a gas station in Utah. Drader didn't pay for gas. He was detained by gas station employees and the police were called. Thus, Drader ended up in police custody. Now he faced punishment for 3 rapes and possibly for Alice's murder as well. To determine if Drader was involved in Alice's death, his DNA was needed. The police compared it with the DNA found at the scene of Alice's murder. There was no match. Although Drader was a serial rapist, he was not Alice's killer. It was incredibly close, but no, the detectives had to start all over again from scratch. Time went on. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the police still had no new suspects in Alice's case. 2 years passed, and the police's interest in the case gradually began to fade. The police's interest was fading, but not the interest of Alice's father. He did everything he could to find his daughter's killer. His options were limited. Periodically, he contacted USA Today, where he placed the composite sketch of the criminal on one page. He walked around the city and posted flyers with the composite sketch in stores. In short, he did everything he could to keep the story in the public eye. One day, while entering the city, he saw a billboard. An idea flashed in his mind. This billboard is seen by hundreds of thousands of people every day. Why not place the composite sketch on it? He called the advertising company, told his story, and asked how much it would cost to place the composite sketch on a billboard. They replied, "For you, Mr. Kemp, it will be free." As a result, 8 billboards with the composite sketch were placed on highways near Leawood. The total projected reach of these billboards was about 10,000 views per day, and Alice's father's efforts eventually paid off. 2 years after Alice's murder, the police began receiving messages about people resembling the composite sketch, and most often, one name kept coming up: Ted Hoover. He had a beige Ford pickup truck, just like the suspected criminal. This undoubtedly made Ted Hoover an interesting person for the detectives. Additionally, he worked in pool maintenance, and it was at a pool where Ali was killed. The police visited Ted Hoover at his home in Kansas City. During the conversation, the man was a bit nervous, which was understandable when you are suspected of murder. This didn't alarm the detectives too much. What did alarm them was something else. At the end of the conversation, to exclude him from the list of suspects, Ted Hoover was asked to provide a DNA sample, and he tried his best to avoid this. In the end, he said he would first talk to his lawyer about it. The next day, the detective contacted Ted Hoover's lawyer. The lawyer said that Ted did not want his DNA to be entered into the national database, so he was against voluntarily providing a DNA sample to the police. In response, the detective said he was ready to provide a guarantee letter stating that Hoover's DNA would not be entered into the database and would only be used within the framework of Alice case materials. In the end, the lawyer asked for a pause to convey this information to his client. A couple of days later, the detective contacted Hoover's lawyer again. The lawyer replied that his client was still against providing his DNA to the police. There was no other choice but to obtain a warrant for the forced collection of Hoover's DNA. This took a few more days. Finally, on March 24, 2004, the detectives, now with a warrant, went back to the house where they had first questioned Hoover. But this time, neither Hoover nor his belongings were in the house. Yes, he had fled. As it turned out, he had just been stalling for time to give himself as much chance as possible to escape from the police. He had indeed succeeded quite well, as the police now had no idea where he was. Alice's father also could not sit idly by. He could not allow his daughter's killer to escape unpunished. This time, Roger, Alice's father, decided to use a tried-and-true method again. The police suspected that Ted Hoover was hiding in one of 8 states. Roger contacted advertising companies in each of these states, Colorado, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Wyoming, Kansas, and Nebraska. In total, he purchased more than 500 billboard advertisements in these states. These billboards featured Hoover's face and a request to contact the police if anyone had information about him. This time, it was not free for Roger. He had to spend more than $100,000 on this advertising campaign. He didn't have that kind of money. In addition to spending all his savings, he also had to sell his house, where he had lived for more than 20 years, in order to find his daughter's killer. Fortunately, it was not in vain. In August 2004, the police received a message that someone in Missouri had recognized the men from the billboard. However, as the message stated, this person was now living under the name Benjamin Appleby, not Ted Hoover. The police went to the address provided in the message and indeed found the man they knew as Ted Hoover. He was arrested on the spot. Now, the police could legally take a sample of his DNA, in this case, saliva. As expected, Benjamin Appleby's DNA, also known as Ted Hoover, fully matched the DNA found at the crime scene.
She was in the pump room doing something with the pump.
And you wanted to have sex with her, right?
I wanted to hit on her, you know, she was an attractive young lady. I tried to hit on her, I touched her. Not hard, nothing. Either on the shoulder or the hip or something. She pushed me back, and she punched me. Then I felt like, I'll show you, you know what I mean?
And what happened?
I strangled her, I guess. And I don't know why I did it.
The following picture emerged. Benjamin Appleby, also known as Ted Hoover, had previously been to the pool where Ali worked. This young, attractive girl had caught his attention on that fateful day when the pool was empty due to bad weather. He went there to somehow force sex from Ali. He found her in the pump room. At first, he tried to have sex with her consent. He embraced her, but she pushed him away and hit him. After that, he seemed to go crazy. He started beating her until she eventually lost consciousness. Realizing there was no turning back, he strangled her. After that, he wanted to rape Alice Buddy. For this, he intended to use ointment from the first aid kit as lubrication, the tube of which was found near the body. However, in the end, he got scared and could not do what he had started. He ultimately left the body and fled the crime scene as quickly as possible. The final day of Benjamin Appleby's trial, also known as Ted Hoover, took place on December 10, 2005. As a result, the man was sentenced to 50 years in prison. This ended Roger's fight for justice and his hunt for the man who killed his daughter.